Hello.
Wide angle. We can do this.
It's unnerving not be able to see
Okay,
what they can
so we are streaming. And going to mute participants on entry. I'm going to admit our guests into our meeting. Yes, Mary. I just admitted the guests. I just admitted them. Rickson. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Let me have everyone except council. Okay. Hi, folks. This is Christy Holmes at Village Hall. I'm going to moderate the meeting tonight. I'd like to thank you for being patient. We were having some background technical difficulties. As we begin,
Somebody's trying to connect to audio. Ann Rose, I think.
I muted all the participants. So I'm going to ask at this time that everyone stay muted while council initiates the meeting, and until they ask for the participants to speak and join in the conversation, I'll ask that you stay muted until that time. I'm going to turn it over to Erin Group, Council President.
Hi. We had some technical difficulties, so we're sharing a computer here in Village Hall. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. I'll work on projecting my voice, a regular thing. Thank you for your patience. I call this meeting to order at 7:14. This is a public hearing with the Village Council. Rob, can you do the roll call, please? Hold on. Council, you're gonna need to unmute because we're gonna do roll call.
And Grube,
Here.
DiBernardo,
Here.
Rocky,
Here.
Wyville,
Oh, he has recused himself. Sorry.
Newell,
Here.
Evans,
Jan's muted.
Where is she?
I know Jen's here.
Just 1 second. She's here. I just asked her to unmute.
Here.
And Rogoff.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, Rob, can you give us a quick introduction of the project that we're looking at tonight?
Sure. The application from Rick Seagot is for his building at 17 River Street. He turned in plans to make some alterations to the building, both of the structure itself, as well as the addition of a deck in the rear of the property that fronts the Chagrin River. The proposed new deck that we're discussing tonight is approximately 361.5 square feet. It is 46 feet wide at the outside edge and about 35.5 foot wide as it touches the building. It extends 9 foot out from the rear wall of the building, going towards the river. And it does have several overlap areas with an existing deck on the west side or on the east side of the property and an existing staircase on the west side of the property. The proposed deck is 4.5 feet further out than the west side stairs, and it's 5 foot further out than the east side existing deck. The existing lower deck area that's currently there at the building is 2 foot away from the river's edge at the closest point. And the new proposed deck would be 7 feet from the river edge. The entire area in question here is all within the riparian zone, which is a 120-foot buffer from the edge of the river. The majority of the property, the buildings, everything that's existing there is within that buffer. This project and all the alterations were first presented as a walk-in to the Architecture Review Board on March 3rd of 2020. The deck originally was shown as a cantilever deck, and there was a little bit of discussion at the walk-in presentation. They came back to present for preliminary approval on the May 4th, 2020 Architecture Review Board meeting. There was limited discussion on the deck. The main part of that discussion centered around the alterations to the building, and those minutes were sent out to all of you. And then also the project was brought before the Board of Zoning Appeals at their May 26th, 2020 meeting, on which several variances were granted for the overall project. The ones that are in question tonight are pertaining to the rear deck part of the project. Let me just get some materials here. There is 3 variances that are up for discussion tonight. The first is the use variance, which is under, just get my notes here. Give me a second, please. I had a piece of paper that had all this right here. Yeah, I think that's a little, I want to be clear on that code section. I'd let you all know here. Yeah. I apologize for the delay here. I have the whole. Okay, I got it. First is the use section is section 1151.03, permitted uses in the riparian buffer zone. The second variance that's under discussion is 1151.02, the establishment of a riparian buffer area setback and boundary. That's to actually build within that zone. And the third is section 1145.02B, non-conforming buildings and structures and additions, which is the addition to a non-conforming structure. It's kind of an overview of where we are right now. If you have any questions on that information?
Any questions? Okay. Well, we will start with giving the 17 River Street team an opportunity to present what their plans are. Dale, do you want to swear them in? And
Yeah, let me explain the procedure. It's
Okay.
the same thing we did for those who were at the Board of Zoning Appeals. As each person wants to testify, they'll let Christy know, and then I will look at them on the screen and have them be sworn in. We'll follow that with every witness. If anybody wants to examine or ask questions of whoever just testified, Christy has to look to see if somebody's raised their hand or sent in a chat note that they want to ask questions. But before that, we would have counsel ask questions of each witness first.
okay. Can we let the folks from 17 River Street go first?
Yes.
Who from 17 River Street will be presenting first? You can unmute yourself and identify yourself. Jordan?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Dale, can you swear Jordan, please?
I can. Do you want to raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you'll give to the village council? I almost said Board of Zoning Appeals. The village council will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. I'm Jordan Burns. I'm counsel to the applicant here, Paul Seagot, who, along with Rick Duty and Joe Saccone, are looking forward to the renovation and reopening of the restaurant now known as 17 River Street. As I think everybody here knows, but let me just review a little bit. While I understand from the introduction, we're here to discuss one set of variances that were granted in conjunction with the proposed addition of a deck to the, I'll call it the system of decks at the rear of the building. There were actually 3 sets of variances that were considered and all granted by the BZA at its May 26th meeting. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about those if those are not variances that you're reviewing during this meeting, but I want to give a little bit of context because I think it's important. The 2 other sets of variances go like the ones you're considering to the renovation and updating of the building. One set had to do with the replacement of windows with glass doors to make, frankly, to connect the inside and outside of the building better than they're currently connected. The other had to do with the replacement, I'll call it the renovation of one of the rear decks. And Rick Siegfried, who's going to be talking just after me, will talk a little bit about that again, just for context. And that the proposed renovation of that deck was also approved by the BZA. And the third is the one that you're considering tonight. That has to do with a new deck that would connect the 2 existing decks at the east and west end of the building. As Rob Jamieson explained a moment ago, and as was explained during the BZA meeting, that deck requires the same variances as the other renovations to the building required. Variance from section 114502B, which governs non-conforming buildings, and a variance from section 115102, which governs the setback in the riparian buffer area. And those were granted by the BZA. The variance that was required in connection with this deck, different from the other variances, was a use variance. And that's a variance from the regulations contained in 115103 of the riparian buffer regulations. And it's important to focus on that use provision before you start thinking about whether to affirm the BZA's decision, because the purpose of that provision is very specific, and it's set out in section 115101. And your law director, Dale, explained this to the BZA sort of as a precursor to their discussion of this use variance as well. Under 115101, the express intent of the use restriction in the riparian buffer area is, and I'm reading now, to limit impact of land uses on rivers in order to preserve and conserve the quality, purity, clarity, and free-flowing condition of streams, maintain natural water temperatures, preserve aquatic and terrestrial plant and animal habitat, prevent erosion of stream banks, lessen the level of siltation of stream waters, and preserve valuable water resources in the interest of present and future generations. And that's important because, as you'll hear tonight from the rest of the team here, nothing proposed in connection with this connecting deck will impact water quality, result in erosion, or harm water resources in any way. As Dale explained to the BZA, and as the BZA considered the applicable standards here that apply to practical difficulty in undue hardship in meeting the use requirements of the code, there are a number of conditions to be weighed. Not all of them have to be met, they have to be weighed. And let me just run through those real quick, just for context for what you're going to hear. One, the condition can't be self-created. Here, the condition we're talking about, the restriction on the use, is not self-created. It's created by an ordinance, and it's created by an ordinance that was passed after the building was constructed, decades after, and decades after decks were first constructed at the rear of the building. And that's important because there also has to be a unique condition existing on the property. And the unique condition that the BZA really focused on was the fact that there are existing decks on this building, and there have been existing decks for decades, again, long before the riparian buffer ordinance was adopted by the village. And so this really is a modification and an important one, no doubt, but in the grand scheme of things, a relatively minor modification to the existing system of decks at the rear of the building. And that makes this a unique circumstance, in addition to the location of the property itself along the riverbank, backing up to an area that's largely rock. And so the unique condition is of great importance. And again, that's what the BZA largely focused on. They also focused, and this is important, on the fact that the addition of this deck really does complete the system of decks at the rear of the building. This is something that Lisa Kramer from the BZA and also Jim Holdren from the BZA focused on as being important to them in looking at the unique conditions, and you'll hear about that tonight. 3, the property cannot be used for the purposes for which it is zoned. Here, obviously, the bulk of the property can. The rear portion of the property where this deck is going to be located is in a location where nothing can be done. Again, it's adjacent to the rear of the building. It's a rocky slope. It's adjacent to the area that's available to the public to view the falls from the north of the river, but not accessible for any of the permitted uses, which are really, recreational uses, walking along the river. Can't do that here. And nothing that's going to be done here with the deck is going to interfere or alter that in any way, because the only contact between the deck and the riverbank itself is going to be the piers that are going to support it. And those piers aren't going to interfere with water quality. They aren't going to cause erosion. They're going to be drilled into rock. And Isaac Lewin, the structural engineer who designed the deck, is here tonight. He submitted a letter that I believe you all have. And he'll talk a little bit about the design and how it will both be a safe way to support the deck, a way that will not cause damage to the riverbank, and also a safe way to utilize the decks. And that's a point that you'll hear also from Rick Siegfried, the architect here. That there is a safety factor that's important here. The addition of this deck allows for there to be 2 means of egress from this system of decks. Right now, there's only one. So if there were a fire, like there was once before at this property, or some other calamity, there'd be a means to exit the deck if one way was blocked, and that's important. Next, is this the minimum, will this violate the spirit of the planning and zoning code? And the answer is no. Again, because the section at play here is the section that deals with water quality. There's no impact on water quality from what we're doing. This deck is going to be above the riverbank and not impacted at all. 5 is this the minimum necessary to avoid the unnecessary hardship? And you'll hear again from the designer, from Isaac Lewin, that this is, that as Rob Jamieson noted, there was a cantilevered deck that was originally proposed. That's not a workable alternative here. Isaac will talk about that. This is the minimum that's necessary to create a safe, sturdy deck, completion of the deck system. Lastly, does this result from special conditions unique to the property being reviewed? And as I explained before, it does, and that's what the BZA primarily focused on. This is a unique building with a unique system of decks that already exist at the rear of the building. So those are the factors to consider in connection with the use variance. The area variance, frankly, was far less controversial before the BZA. It had considered area variances in connection with the other sets of variances that I described. And I won't go into great detail here on each of the points, other than to say that these are what's commonly referred to as the Duncan factors that boards of zoning appeals and city village councils reviewing decisions of boards of zoning appeals ruling on area variances frequently consider. And again, there's a balancing test. Is the variance substantial? Here it's not. There's decks already. There's decks with supported by piers already. This is just another section of deck similar to the ones that are there already. Is the essential character of the neighborhood going to be altered? Here, the BZA found that if it's going to be altered at all, it's for the better, because this deck is going to be covering a portion of the building that frankly is not attractive. There is a cinder block wall that's painted, really camouflage brown, that is not an enhancement to the view of the river. This deck will be. And that seemed to be the consensus of the BZA. Will this adversely affect the delivery of government services? No. Again, to the extent that there were an emergency at the rear of the building, this provides an additional means of access. Property owner did not purchase this property with knowledge of this riparian setback. Paul Seagat purchased this property back in the early 90s, long before the riparian buffer regulations were in place. As you'll hear from the architect and the designer, this isn't a predicament that can feasibly be obviated through some other means. Again, the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirements are being observed. This is not hurting the water quality. And this is not based on circumstances that are self-created. This is a function of, frankly, the impact of the riparian setback on a structure that really doesn't affect riparian issues. And again, I want to focus on what the code focuses on. The riparian issues are the water quality issues. I know that before the BZA, and I suspect before the village council, there's going to be concern about whether this creates some sort of precedent that other property owners in the area will use to argue that they should be granted a variance to allow for decks. Let me just address 2 points on that, and then I'm going to let people more knowledgeable on the details here of the structure weigh in. Number one, as the BZA focused on, this is a unique circumstance. This is not a situation where there is no deck system and the applicant is seeking a variance in order to install a deck. There are decks on this building. There have been decks there for decades. This is an enhancement to, and again, in the scheme of decks that are there, a relatively minor change in that. It's not going to extend out over the edge of the riverbank, as you heard. I think there may be a little bit of disagreement about the proximity of the deck to the river. I'll let the design professionals address that. But this isn't going to extend out over the riverbank. It's not into the river or anything like that. This is just an addition to an already existing network of decks. And so this really is a unique situation where nobody in the area can make a similar claim, I don't think. Number two, at the risk of being blunt, your riparian setback regulations really don't address in the visual clutter that could be created from a network of decks on all of the buildings in the area. There's some reference in the chapter to whether the natural state is going to be significantly disturbed by a variance or by a use in the riparian area. Here, the riparian area isn't going to be disturbed by anything. All that's going to be placed here are some concrete piers supporting the deck. The deck is going to be over the riverbed. It's going to hang over it. So you don't have that either. But if the concern is visual clutter without any impact on water quality or things of that nature, you probably have other tools at your disposal in your zoning code that will protect you from that. So I would ask you to focus on, like I said at the onset, the section from which we're seeking a variance, which is a very specific section that exists to protect some very specific issues relating to water quality. I'm happy to answer any questions, but other than that, I'm gonna turn this over. You're gonna hear from Rick Siegfried, the architect involved in the renovation of the building. You're gonna hear from Isaac Lewin, the structural engineer who designed the deck addition. And you're also gonna hear from Rick Duty, who along with Joe Saccone is spearheading the renovation of the restaurant and looking forward to its reopening. Joe Saccone is also on the line if there are any questions that he needs to answer, as is Paul Seagat, the owner. Thank you.
Before we swear anybody else in, Council, if you have any questions for Jordan Burns, you should do so now.
Ready?
No.
Jim, you good?
I'm good.
Oh, I was asking Jim. He was very frozen in his.
Oh,
I have that effect on people.
Okay, with no questions from council, let's go on to the next member of 17 River Street going to address. Any volunteers?
Rick
Is Rick
Siegfried, I
next?
think that's you.
Rick, are you next?
Okay, Rick, can you raise your right hand for me?
Yes, sir.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you'll give to the village council will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right. Rob or Christy, I don't know if you want to bring up the package of images that we gave you, or if you want to let me share the screen so I can point around.
Rob, do you have Rick, I'm happy to give you screen sharing rights.
It's probably easier if we do it that way. And I'll be looking off into the sky because the camera's not in front of the computer. But
That's okay. Let me know if you have the ability to share your screen.
okay, share screen. Share. All right. Do you all have my screen?
Yes, we do.
yes.
Okay, I'll hit some of the stuff very briefly that Mr. Burns talked about in terms of the first variances that didn't meet with much resistance. But if you can see my cursor, the original design of the building had a system of folding doors that worked right through here, and essentially in inclement weather, the bar was confined to this area and the rest of this was outdoor, and that blue is going crazy. It's making me nuts. Right, so this part of the bar out here had there was a system of vinyl drop-down curtains, which are often maligned and not much loved. So part of that variance was we took those vinyl curtains out and replaced them with glass systems. So there's a series of folding glass doors here and overhead glass doors around the back. So it's much better looking from the street. It activates everything from the street better when the doors are down. It's better environmentally. It's better energy-wise. It's just all over better. So that's what that was all about. And I don't think there was much discussion there. This area here where it says new upper deck, the bar originally had kind of a little kink in it. You can kind of see where I'm going here with my cursor. Part of what we did was we squared this off by adding a little tiny bit to the building here, but it allows for room around the bar, kind of an overall better feeling. And then with all the glass here, we kind of discovered during construction that, gee, wouldn't it be great if there was some deck here as well? Because this is a great place to be. It's the highest part of the deck. Wonderful view of the falls. Don't intend to put any tables up there. And there may be a couple, but it's really just a place for patrons and guests to go outside and have a look around and see the deck and see the river and enjoy the falls, which obviously is where we got our name and one of the best attributes of the village. So then we move on to the area down below. So the lower area, there's an existing deck right here. It comes over like that. It sticks out about 4.5 feet on this corner. And when you leave this deck, as you come around here and you go up a series of stairs, and you connect to the stairway that leads to the village river falls overlook that's over here on the side, and you can go up that way. On this side over here, there's another stairway that takes you up and around the building out across the parking lot that Mr. West owns, and that's a second way out. What our proposal does It's connect the deck from here to here, and you'll see it in the photographs. And it extends out about an average of 4.5 feet from what's already there. And I promise you, it does not hang out over the river. So our idea is to put 4 tables or so out there. Current social distancing, it's probably going to work. We don't know how long that'll be in play, if it'll ever change. Hopefully it does. The idea isn't really to increase a lot of seating, but it's to give people, like Mr. Jordan said, good access to the river, get out, hear the sound, feel it, look at it. And then also the ability here, we replaced the windows with some folding doors so that all that sound of the water rushing over and the river going down through the valley kind of comes cascading into the dining room and makes this a much more enjoyable space. And you kind of feel like you're in a basement there at the moment. Not entirely, but this is going to help that quite a bit. I would emphasize that it really is going to increase the safety factor down here because you'll have 2 ways off of here. Not that we expect any problems, but like we heard, there was one in the past. So that's kind of the extent of it as far as functionally what it looks, what the plan is. We've got some drawings here. What was here previously was a fireplace. It worked, but it kind of overheated the people inside and wasn't really all that visibly attractive from the outside. It was nice, but this series of folding doors here is going to probably work much better when they open up. And then so the street and the inside the bar become kind of the same place, and that'll feel a lot better and should work well for the restaurant. On the east side of the building, what was currently the drop downs, which will show up in a photograph, have been replaced with overhead doors. And this little part right here is the addition that was put onto the building. And this is that new deck that's way back. And as you can see, it's way back off the edge, the leading edge of the building. The new deck is down here. So again, the existing deck comes out kind of in this area, and we're extending it 4.5 feet. The new deck is going to have an awning over it. The awning is going to match the awning that's already over the existing deck. And I think that's important to understand that that's going to be an awning. It's going to match what's there. And here's a view from the back where, come on, Rick. This is the door that currently is an egress door out, and the stairway that exists comes from here across and up. There's windows in these openings. We will replace those with the folding door system, so you can open that up and have the river respond, or the dining room down below respond to the deck, and the deck to the river, and then put a couple tables out there. And then it connects over to the existing deck down below, which runs from here to here. And then another stairway system up. So again, it gets you up and out from both sides. The foundation system we've talked about, and this is original, an elevation view that we did. Since then, I'll show you another image that'll represent it more accurately. So there's these 24-inch sonotubes that go down. They're embedded. They will be embedded 2 feet into the rock. These posts come up off of them. They're braced. We had originally contemplated kicking it back into the existing foundation, but the existing foundation is kind of an unknown. We don't really know. Mr. Loon, who you're going to hear from eventually soon here, just really looked at this, and in coordination with Joe Rechtenwald from David Loon Associates, a geotechnical engineer, thought that just going straight down in the rock would be easier, more stable, and provide a better solution. And that's what we're proposing. Okay. And here's an image we created in Photoshop. And this is a photo that I took from the lower observation deck across the river that the village owns. And this shows the existing deck here. This projection out of the new deck. We want to replace that whole railing system with a cable rail to increase visibility. You can see here one of the piers, and this is about as much of it as you're going to see. This one will kind of stick up some. There's another one that drops down because the grade goes down. And so a lot of this will be hidden, at least during summertime, by all this foliage. And we will faux paint this, put rock on it, whatever we need to do to make it blend in to the wall behind and the scenery. So what's really important to note, and you'll see it, and I can come back to this image, but this facade here, it's kind of, it all goes straight up. This form that'll come across and connect these two decks helps to break that up, provides the railing, provides the awning, and it kind of aesthetically really helps the back of the building. I will add that the Architecture Review Board has reviewed this and they gave us a favorable review and I think unanimously passed everything. So again, I'm bouncing back and forth a little bit, but here's what the front of it looked like. Now there's a glass system in front of there. So this fireplace is gone and the face isn't smiling at us or frowning at us anymore. Same thing here. And then on this side, you can see where these vinyl drop downs occurred and now they're going to be glass doors. Just some more views of the front of us. If you've been down there lately, you'll see that the stone's all been lightened up. The wood is a kind of a white color. It lightens the whole thing up and it feels really nice as the renovations continue. Here's what the back of the building looks like right now. So you can see that there's this concrete block and then the stone starts, but it's, you know, it's not ideal. You've got this kind of big mass here. I think everybody just kind of lives with it and accepts it, but we believe that what we're proposing by connecting across the deck not only adds to the safety of the building, but aesthetically it connects these two dots. You know, that if they sort of, you look at it now, it's like, well, why isn't there any deck across there? Why, you know, why did they stop? And there were reasons at the time, and those aren't important. What's important is right now we kind of want to make this better, connect that deck across there. You can see it here as well. It'll kind of help hide what's going on underneath here. Again, it'll be really hard to see this stuff because there's so much foliage in the way. Going down here, you can see again where these vinyl drops were. This piece of wall is coming out. So there's overhead doors here that'll open up and then connect that to the deck outside here. So when I go back to this, I think it makes more sense to look at this in relationship to what you just looked at in terms of the photographs of the way it is now, that this deck will come in here. This will be a nice dark color to match what's there. It'll match the block wall that's back behind here. These will be faux painted. The wood's going to be dark. And then up above there, the light color and the white that's being done on the rest of the building wraps around back here. We're proposing to add a sign up here, which was approved in the original drawings for Jekyll's in the rebuild 5 years ago. They just never put it on. And that's a little bit bigger sign than your code allows, but that's for a later day. But because of the scale of this thing, it seems really important. And the building kind of really wants identity from this side because you can see it in a lot of places and it has a pretty prominent view. Again, here's that upper deck that was talked about and approved. And I want to emphasize again that the Architectural Review Board, who, you know, they're in charge of the aesthetics, looked at this and thought, yeah, that's pretty nice. And they didn't even see this drawing. They saw some different drawings. But I think you get the picture that this is going to work out really nice. These posts are set back, the deck cantilevers out over them to kind of make this cross bracing and these columns recede into the background. You know, we've got this with the sun shining on it early in the morning, right? But normally they'll be in shadow and it'll just kind of blend in with what's there. I'm going to keep it short unless you want to hear more from me. If I would, I guess, open it up to questions. And if there are no questions, pass it on to Mr. Lewin.
It's not really, is the intention to eventually put down vinyl sides on the deck underneath the awning?
No, you know, because there's seating, enough seating inside, and I guess I'll add, because it's bound to come up, there was a variance that goes with this building that allows for 120 parking spaces, and I believe the code is 1 car for every 2 spaces. And Joe Ciccone, you can jump in when your time comes if I'm mistaken on that. So the seating is limited in here no matter what. So when the weather's not nice enough to sit out here, we still got the upper deck here. And you know, if they fill this up, including this area where we put the doors and everything to make that area more comfortable when it's cold outside, and the lower level gets filled and the upper level gets filled, Rick Duty, you can chime in whenever, but I think that'll make you guys, everybody happy. But there's not a plan right now to drop vinyl down here either. It'll kind of ruin the look of it.
Yeah, okay.
My question goes to the footers on the deck piers. What's the plan on digging those and building them? I know you talked about the sonotubes, but I mean, really, what's the plan on digging them?
Okay, so the gentleman that's doing this was the guy that also built all the decks for the village. And what happens over here is you basically dig it by hand. And when you get down to rock, you put the sonotube in and then you chip the rock out with a jackhammer or a hammer or something. And you lift it out in buckets. And it's kind of a really painstaking pain in the neck, but it keeps all erosion and stuff from becoming an issue. So yeah, you dig down through whatever dirt, and there isn't a whole lot, and you get into the rock and you go a couple feet farther. So you got a pocket or a socket down in there. And it's the same way that, and I have pictures on my phone, but they're not part of this. The stairway that's over here behind these trees was built the same way, although I don't know if they pocketed into the rock or not, but that's been there for a long time and they haven't moved, they haven't budged. The stairway straight. It'll hold. We've got Mr. Lewin to talk about it. We've got a geotechnical engineer involved to make sure that it's done the right way. It's not an unusual way to do things. I mean, in some ways we're fortunate that this is rock because we get down to the rock. We've got a soil bearing pressure of 5,000 to 6,000 pounds per square foot. So ultimately this deck is way, I don't want to say the word over design, but it's not going anywhere. But that's how you do it. There's no machine coming down here. We're not going to make a mess, dump a bunch of dirt and mud into the river and silt it up for the people downstream. It's all done with shovels and 5-gallon buckets and carried off site.
How far down do you think the rock is? Do you have a sense of that at this point?
It varies. Typically there's a foot or two of dirt and then you find the rock, but the dirt and the rock all varies along there. So
Right.
here it's pretty deep and then it comes up higher and then it comes up higher again. Because there's a hill coming down along here. And you can see that, because this was taken from an actual photograph, you can see where the low spots are. So yeah, it's not going through a whole lot of dirt to get to the rock, but once you get to the rock, obviously nothing's moving.
Yeah.
Empirically speaking, the building's been here for an awful long time and it hasn't slid into the river either. And this foundation system is probably more conservative than the building itself. So again, I don't want to do anything, and I'm sure Isaac Lewin doesn't want to do anything either, that's going to come back to haunt us in 5 or 10 years. So we've been pretty careful with it. And again, you've got all these other decks over here that have been built and they're not going anywhere to the best of anyone's knowledge. So we're confident.
Council, does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Siegfried?
No.
No, I don't.
Okay, then. Who's up next?
I assume I'm going to stop sharing unless, Isaac, you want me to stay here?
Hold on, Isaac, you're muted. We're going to unmute
All right.
you.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Rick, if you would leave this up, because there's a couple pictures on here of the rear of the building I'd like you to move to when we get to that point. As a matter of fact, why don't you move to them now, if you don't mind?
Sure.
The rear of the building.
Isaac, let me swear you in first.
That's true.
Okay. Do you, you ready? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you'll give to village council will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, for those that don't know me, I'm Isaac Lewin. I'm a professional structural engineer in the Cleveland, Ohio area, and I've been practicing, well, for 45 years, having my own practice for 33 years. As I said in the letter, when the fire occurred in this building some 6-7 years ago, I was involved with the restoration and repair of the building to make it what it is now. So I'm familiar with the site. I'm familiar with Chagrin Falls. And so, you know, we designed the deck. Rick, I thought there was a close-up of the back of the building, better close-up. Maybe the next page? No, never mind.
Oh, this is it.
Stay with that one.
Doesn't mean I can't zoom in. Where do you want to go here?
No, you're fine. You're fine right there. You're fine right there. That's fine.
How's
No,
that?
too much. No, okay, stop.
That one?
Stop. Stop. Okay. All right. The deck, as you can see from the floor line, the lowest floor line of the restaurant as it is now to grade is, while guessing, is somewhere about 6 to 8 feet deep. And when we initially talked about this deck between Rick and myself, we did talk about cantilevering it by coming up with some sort of a knee brace system that would tie into the walls of this building. However, we do not know, and judging from what we saw when we restored the building after the fire, we're not all that confident with the structure of this building. The foundation system, in my mind, is unknown. It could be even questionable, even though the building hasn't moved. But for our purposes, if we were to do some sort of a cantilever or knee brace deck, we would be putting a significant amount of tension right at the floor line where the concrete floor would sit on the wall and transition to the stone wall that you see above. And that's a dangerous place to have a connection, since we don't know how everything is connected at that location. So when we talked about it, we just felt the safest way was to do a standard deck with piers dug into the hillside. Now, having done work, like I said, in this area, having visited this site many times, just as a casual observer, as a tourist, I know that that bank is very steep. I knew that we had shale fairly shallow. So I felt confident we would go down into the shale. And my specifications were to require that the sonotubes or piers, not drilled piers in this instance, but the piers would be socketed into the shale rock. This was to ensure that it would not slip. The shale rock is stable. You can tell that because the hillside is so steep, and that's all shale. And so that's what we elected to do as being the safest option for the stability of the building, the safest option for the deck, and also the most constructible option for the deck. Because to do anything else, you would have had to bring down major pieces of equipment to work there, and there is no access to get to that location. So it all has to be hand labor. And that's why we elected to go that way. We retained the services of David Lewin Geotechnical Engineers. And by the way, there was no relationship between myself and that office. And they examined the site during some excavations. And the only variance that they made from what I had specified was that the contractor actually dig down beyond what's called the weathered shale and dig 2 feet into the hard shale that's below the weathered shale, giving it again a better socketed condition, a more safer condition, and something that still was buildable. And so we proceeded to design the deck on that basis. The deck is designed per code for 100 pounds per square foot. All the lumber is designed for that. All the posts are designed for that. And as Rick pointed out, when you're sitting on hard shale, we're getting 6,000 pounds a square foot. And at the diameters we're at, we could probably support at least probably a 2-story building on top of that deck. So we're confident. I feel safe with this. I've done this design before where we had hillside problems, and we've dug down and socketed into the shale. And I've not had any problems with any of my designs in 35 years.
Any questions from council?
Yeah, I've got one quick question. Is this deck going to be attached in any manner to the existing building, or is this going to be a completely freestanding structure?
No, the deck is tied into the building at the floor line. It's tied in with a ledger board that is bolted using epoxy bolts into the existing building. But because of the piers, that it's not a cantilever deck, the only load on that ledger board and on the epoxy bolts are vertical gravity loads, no lateral loads. are coming from that deck into the building. So that's why we feel safe with this design.
Any other questions from council?
Yeah, I have another question. Again, going back to these pillars or piers that you're talking about, you said that they'd be 2 feet into the ground?
No, 2 feet into the hard shell. The ground right
So how
now, you have a layer of soil that's somewhere between 6 to 12 inches thick. Then you hit what's called weathered shell. I mean, you could walk up and break it apart in your hand. That's laminated, delaminated. I'm sure you've walked in parts of the river where you can do that with shale bedrock. And per the geotechnical engineer, we instructed the contractor that he's going to have to go down 2 feet into the hard shale. So by the time we're done, I'm estimating he's going to be below grade. He's going to be between 5 to 6 feet below grade.
So that's below the current level of the ground. Is that what?
That's what I'm saying.
What you
Yes,
call
the
it,
current
grade?
level of the ground would be 5, 6 feet below grade. And the top of the pier would probably just stick up 6 inches above grade to prevent any water that's running off the hillside from hitting the wood columns and deteriorating those.
Because in some of the other projects along the river, there was talk about having to drill down 30 feet to get to bedrock.
A lot of that depends on what loads you're talking about and where you are along the river. If you're upstream by the old paper mill, before that was demolished, there you're upstream and there's more silt and soil buildup that you would probably have to drill down 20 to 30 feet to find bedrock, to find shale. So again, it depends where you are. At this particular location, we're right on top of the shale. You can see the shale in the picture that Rick has on the screen now. If you look towards the left-hand side where that downspout comes down. No, to the right, Yeah, right there. That's the shale that we're looking at. So shale is shale, and I'm gonna have to do this slowly. Shale is shallow at this location.
And what about a little bit downriver from you? Is that the same case down a little bit downriver from you?
Depends how far downriver. I mean, I've done a few projects along River Road where we've driven piles. As a matter of fact, we had to drive friction piles because the shale was more like 60 to 70 feet deep along River Road.
But what about what is that building next to you? I don't know the office
Oh,
building.
a little further south.
Where your parking lot is, basically.
Yeah, I can't speak for it because I haven't really studied that site, at least not from the riverside.
Hey, Nancy, can you hear me? Am I still
Sure.
available? So I think, and I'm not by no means an expert, but I think that part of what happens here is because the falls is right there, there's a lot more erosion in this area because the water's moving fast and it carries the dirt away. And then as it goes downriver and the current slows, it starts to drop that soil back off and it builds up. And that's where you get conditions where you got to go down deeper to get to the rock. But here the rock is higher, and as the river's worked its way over for hundreds of years, it hit the rock, it caused the falls, it causes the erosion. So that's why the conditions vary up and down the river.
Right, and similar to what Niagara Falls is like, eventually Chagrin Falls, the falls that you see now from below the ice cream shop, is actually going to end up in geological time on the other side of the bridge, because that water will keep eroding that shale and it'll keep moving upstream.
Let's hope we're here to see it, but we probably won't.
But so, so I would expect that the shale, actually, if I remember the geology and the topology heading towards the river along West Washington, it should be shale pretty much until you start the downhill side where the sheep piles are on West River, on West Orange Street. At that point, you might, the shales would be getting shallower. We'd be getting deeper, I'm sorry, once you pass where those sheep piles are.
I've got one question about the geological survey. How did they determine how deep the weathered shale is?
Well, in this instance, it was by field observation. The contractor was digging the holes to figure out how bad it was going to be for him to do the work. And that's when Mr. Rechtenwald was called out, and he was down there working with the contractor, probing the hole, having him dig a few more feet to determine where the sound shale occurred. We did, again, this site is inaccessible to any equipment, and we could not do any kind of real geotechnical drill testing at this particular site. So it was dig a hole and let's see how deep we have to dig it.
So
while we're, go ahead. I'm sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
So I mean, I guess some of the concern, at least that I and some others have, is that there's been a lot of slippage along the river. Maybe not in this exact site, but just upriver from this one, when we put in a little cantilevered sidewalk along Mill Street, we had slope failure there. There was slope failure up the hill above you on West Orange when there were some condos built. There's just been there's slope failure just a little bit further down off Bentleyville Road. That's one lane because of slope failure. So there's an awful lot of slope failure all along there, upriver, down, going into Moreland Hills. So I think that I, for one, I'm very concerned about that in this area, that by drilling and putting, I think it looked like there were 6 concrete pillars.
Correct.
In that
It's
picture.
supposed to be 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 pillars altogether.
Oh, so there's 9. Okay.
There's 9. Yes,
That's even more.
there's 9. There's 7 along the bank and 2 tying back towards the building because of the way the deck was laid out.
Mhm.
Now, if I could address your concerns about slope stability. I was the structural engineer for those condos on West Orange Street. I was also involved at what used to be Dr. Gaiaron's estate. I've been involved with doing work along the Chagrin River, Moreland Hills, Hunting Valley, Gates Mills, with all these slope stability problems for years. I'm very familiar with what all the ordinances are and what all the issues are. And believe me, we get certain houses that are built on certain locations. Not only do the rules require us to get a geotechnical report, but I usually demand one because a slope is a problem. I was involved with the Liberty Hills development, the Highland Hills development in Solon, which had a lot of slope slippage problems. And believe me, I'm very sensitive to slope stability issues. And this site being right on top of shale does not scare me. It's hard shale. It'll weather. It will, we're talking about geological time before the building will have been gone before that shale cliff disappears. So, I'm like I said, I'm very familiar with all the slope issues. I'm very familiar with Bentleyville Road. I've done a few projects, residential and for the city of Bentleyville, village of Bentleyville, along Bentleyville Road. And believe me, I get a client that wants something along Bentleyville Road. First words out of my mouth are, did you do a geotechnical report? Yeah, the Chagrin Valley is there are a number of places along the Chagrin Valley that are very unstable. I don't think this is one of them.
Yeah. I mean, just recently back off Skyline Road, back there off Bentleyville, a whole garage fell down, slipped down the hill back there.
Yeah, and on Bentleyville Road at the very south end by Miles Road, a couple of years ago, I put in a major soldier pile retaining wall because the owner's driveway was sliding down the hillside. So yeah, I'm just saying, I'm very familiar.
Yeah.
I'm very aware of it. I'm very cognizant of this problem, and I will design against those issues.
Right. But one of the things that happens is the closer you actually get to the river, the less dirt there is, because again, it's all being carried away. Whereas down on Bentleyville Road, I think a lot of that stuff has happened a lot higher up away from the river because there's soil there and then you get slippage and things going on. But down by the river, you get to the rock. And the other thing that just occurred to me that I would point out while I've got this photograph up, because there was some conversation about whether this thing hangs out over the river. I think this photograph is a perfect example to say that if, this is about 4.5 feet, we come out 4.5 feet more and over, we're not anywhere near going out over the water with this thing. We'd like to, but maybe, maybe not. I don't know, but we don't. You just
Right.
can't get there.
Rick, can I see if I could share screen from my end? I think
Sure.
I have, if I can figure this out, sorry. There's some parts of technology I can't figure out. Okay,
All
let me
right,
see.
so I'm gonna stop share.
Okay. Okay, share. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
This is an aerial photo taken from the Cuyahoga County GIS site, which is a wonderful site. It can tell you soils, it tells you property lines, it tells you contours, gives you addresses. It's a wonderful site. I use it quite frequently. This is a map that I downloaded that you are looking at the floodplain designations for the Chagrin River at this location. Right where it says area floodplain, let's see. You see my little hand? That's 17 River Street, right there. And this blue is the extreme limits of the flood zone. The red and blue is the floodway that's considered by the Corps of Engineers for high water levels. So if you look at this, where the hand is now, that's the back of the building. That's where the deck is going to be built, connecting those 2 points. And as you can see, at least from this aerial photograph, and according to Cuyahoga County, we're not going to be anywhere near the flood zone problems that the Chagrin River has. You know, we're far enough back, we're set back enough from the river that should not be a problem. And we're high enough that the flood levels don't come up that high. Once you get past the bridge, which is a dam, then the river flows freely and pretty much goes straight downhill at high velocity.
I did one time see that water come up against Starbucks there though, but that was,
Oh, it's come up, and I'm sure, and I know it's flooded the street itself.
it was once in 40 years.
Yeah, and I'm just waiting to see 10 Bell Street disappear, get washed away. Sorry, private joke.
Yeah.
Won't happen.
Apologize.
Okay, any other questions from council at this point?
No.
No, okay.
Thank you,
Okay,
Isaac.
I will release the screen if I can figure.
Yeah, thank you.
We need to
and
ask if anybody
I will go
there
mute.
wants to ask, if there's anybody who's watching who wants to ask questions of Mr. Lewin.
There are a few ways that participants watching can let me know they'd like to speak. They can use the chat function and enter their name, and I can unmute them. If I'm not mistaken, they can unmute themselves and then they could state their name and number, or their name, and get sworn in by Dale. In addition, there are some symbols such as a thumbs up. So any of those three, the chat, a symbol, or just unmuting and identifying yourself. So if you have any questions, feel free to speak up now.
My name's Bill Rowley. Can you see me?
Yeah,
Yes.
I can see you.
Can you hear me?
Looking good,
And
Bill.
I'm the neighbor. I rent the bottom floor of 33 River Street, which is right next to 17.
Bill, hold on. I think Dale needs to swear you in before we get going here.
Okay.
Well, I thought this part is only for those who are asking questions of the people who
Okay, I'm
just
sorry.
testified.
We don't
If
have
you want-
anybody raising their hand, signaling, or except for Bill. Bill's the only person.
I think
Okay.
Rick Duty might want to say some words eventually, but you can talk to Bill first.
All right. So Bill, can you raise your right hand for me? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you'll give to the council tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt and come in probably in the wrong order with this, but I have something else that I have to do at 8:15, so I'll be a little bit late for that. I live next door and I'm at the bottom of 33 River Street. So my office literally looks out on the back of Jekyll's, which was Jekyll's before. So everything that you're talking about is what I live and breathe every day. And we have a tremendous opportunity, I believe. I've watched what has been done across the road at W Design and W Home. And I went to meet with Mr. Duty and I said, look, are you going to do something that looks as good in the back of your building as you've done in the front of the buildings? Because I've gone over to the popcorn shop and I've taken a look from there at the view, and I've gone up on the bridge when I'm at Starbucks, and the back of that building honestly has looked terrible in the past. And I asked Rick, I said, if you will make that look really good, then I will help you. And I don't own the building next door. I just look at it. I look out at this view. I said, if you will do that, I will help you. And there's a corner. If you can go back to that, to the slide and share the slide that Architect Lewin had up with the river. And I'll tell you where to put the cursor. I want to show you a corner that is the biggest eyesore in Chagrin Falls. Is there a way to do that?
I think I just did. Do you see it?
Yep. Okay. Make that a little bit bigger, please. Can you bring it bigger? Go into the corner of 33 and 17, where 33 comes right up against 17. You see that with your cursor? Can you go there?
Talking right here.
I don't see it on mine.
Well,
I'm
does anybody
trying
else?
to-
Okay.
I can
I'm
do it,
trying-
Isaac, if you want to give me the screen back.
Yeah, but you don't have this map.
Yeah, I do.
You did?
Somewhere.
Okay.
I got it. I just got it.
You just circled it. Is that the spot you're talking of?
No, I think
Yes,
he's,
that's exactly the spot. Now, you've got the back of 17, and from what I saw of everything you people have talked about, if it's approved, and I believe that, that's your process with it, but once that gets approved and you get something you're gonna put on the back of it, I talked to Rick and I said, okay, you're gonna make that look great. And I believe that they are. I said, you have an eyesore if you look off your deck straight down and to the right, and that's the corner between these two, because you've got overgrown bushes, you've got trees, you've got garbage, you've got junk. And I am very willing, and as I say, I am a renter, but I am very willing, and I don't know who I offer this to, but I offer to donate $10,000 to clean up that corner and to make it iconic, because it is the view that everybody has from when they're on the bridge or from they're down below the popcorn shop. When they look over, they see these buildings, they see the whole wall, they see the back of Jekyll's, and now it'll be 17 River Street, and they see this ugly corner that nobody wants to address. Last year, I talked to the people and I said, please just bring me down 2 of those little trees and put a couple of lights on them and put them in the corner of the ugliest place in Chagrin. And they laughed and they brought them down and they gave me 2 trees out there. And I'd go up to the bridge and I look and I say, boy, those 2 trees look great. This is a corner that can look great. But if we're going to do something for the back of Jekyll's, which I believe has to have been done. I mean, it honestly has looked ugly forever, and you people will have your ways of making sure that that looks great. Please address this little corner and let Mr. Duty and let myself do it privately. I'll give the money to the village. I'll do anything we have to do. But I just want to have a nice view out of my window, and right now it's not one. And I don't know if I even should have come on and talked on this call, because I probably don't have any right to tell you this, but that can be the most beautiful little corner in Chagrin. And we should do it while we're doing the rest of this. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, we can't take donations to the village in the middle of a zoning hearing, but I appreciate
No, I
your
knew I
passion for
knew I
this
was probably-
wonderful
I
little
knew I was
place that we
probably
have here.
improper. You tell me who will fix it up and I'll help them fix it up. That's how I would say it.
Okay. Do we have any other people who would like to ask questions, or do we have any questions for Mr. Rowley before he heads off to his next meeting? Okay. Okay. Mr. Duty, did you want to speak tonight, or?
Yes, thank you.
Wait,
do I
hold
need
on.
to-
Let me swear you in.
Yes,
You know the drill. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you'll give to the village council will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Thank you very much, City Council members, for considering our deck extension. We committed to this restaurant prior to the pandemic occurring back in the end of the year. I've known Joe Ciccone, my new partner, for a long, long time. And my father was a partner with him in early days of Hyde Park Grill. And sorry, quiet, quiet. Sorry, that's my dog. Shh. And we decided to partner on this. Shh. And excuse me. Anyway, Leo, shush up. Quiet. Hey. Sorry, anyway, what I want to say is that, the whole success of this iconic location is to try to take advantage of the views of the water any way you can with respect to all the zoning and commitments that are there. And so that's what we're trying to do here. We are trying to be successful as a restaurant, but the reality is it's very dependent on in these troubled times, having a little more ability to social distance and a little bit more ability to enhance the views of this beautiful city and town as much as you can. I've been a member of City Council for a member of the Chagrin Falls community for a long time. I've had my office there for over 20 years, and I'm very committed to helping make the town as better than it is. Shh, quiet. So, excuse me. Hey, let him out, please. Sorry. That's it. That's all I have to say. If you want to ask me questions, feel free.
Any questions for Mr. Duty from council?
Sorry, I did not expect that.
I mean, it's better your dog than my children.
Yeah. He sounds a lot tougher than he is.
Tell Leo he wasn't sworn in, so he can't bark.
No, I know. It's very inappropriate. So, but
okay.
Thank you. And thank you again for considering this.
Any questions? Okay, do we have anyone else from 17 River that wants to speak tonight? Okay, Mr. Ciccone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I just want to say that,
excuse me. We need to swear him in.
Sure, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you'll give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to, add a few comments to, what we did and in the back of the building and the way it looks. When Jekyll's has been a process, and we know the building is extremely important to the village from that standpoint. And I think over the past 20 years, and that's kind of how long it's been for us, when we started the project a long time ago, was always to try to enhance that building and enhance the ambience and the view and things of that nature. I think when the fire happened, which was of course devastating for a lot of reasons, a lot of people, a lot of merchants down there, we tried to do the best we could under the time frame. We were under extreme pressure from the insurance company at that time, which I'm sure a lot of people can appreciate. But we had plans for the back of that, and we know it looks candidly not what we really wanted it to look like. It was never finished. It doesn't look good. We all know that. And we tried to do the best we could, but the time constraints, the economics of it was extremely challenging during that process. And I think what we've done, or at least what we looked at, was we never finished it. And the sign wasn't there. The back doesn't look good. We know that. And I think in this particular case, in working with Rick Duty, and Rick's correct, Alton Duty was our partner in 1988. His father was. And it was very difficult for us as a company to let Jekyll's go into somebody else's hands. I can't explain how difficult that was because we do have a company of our own. But Rick's vision was better than mine. His design process of what he's looked at this was better than mine. And I think everybody needs to know that. I mean, I'm a resident of Chagrin. My children have gone to Chagrin Falls. My youngest son still does. He's going into his 9th grade. So, the building itself is important to not only myself, because we live there and it's always been that way. But I couldn't think of I couldn't give this to somebody else, another company or another person than Rick, simply because of the history with his father, his wife Wendy, what they've done, their insight, their vision for what would be to take care of this property for the village for the next 20 years, kind of like what we attempted to do. Rick and Wendy had told me that they apologized when we looked through it and said, we're going to change this. We're sorry. We're sorry. And it's almost like saying to me, like, we're sorry, we're going to deal with what you just built essentially 5 years ago. So what Rick is doing and what the building is becoming, and we're still a partner in it, and we wanted to be, and that was part of the deal, was to let Rick take it for the next 20 years and make it great and make it better than what we did. So going to the back of the deck, it was in our early plans. We never got to finish that, added on. Economically, we ran out of money from the insurance, and timing restricted us from doing that. So I just want to point that out, that it's not just a restaurant, it's a fabric of this village. We get it, we understand that, we always have. And that's why we're still involved, because it's that important. And I think when you look at the pictures of what Rick Siegfried's done, the back of the building, what it's going to look like, and that's what it's going to look like versus what it looked like now, it's a great improvement. From a safety issue, there's no doubt we would never do anything to jeopardize or live that nightmare. The fire was bad enough, what we went through, and God forbid nobody got hurt, and that was great. So all those things were taken into consideration. I think it's also noted that the economics of what Rick is putting into it, or what the company's putting into this, is probably well in excess of $700,000 to make this place better. And I think it's a great project. We just hope that you believe it is too. And we just want your support. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Okay, council, conversation, questions?
I would like to say that I believe that the additional business, and that we need to be very supportive of businesses willing to come into Chagrin. And particularly right now, our restaurant businesses are really, really struggling. And I think it would be in our best interest to do this. I also appreciate them connecting the decks on the back. And I did speak with the fire marshal today, as well as Chief Zugan, and they both think that that makes the structure a lot safer than it is presently. So I am in favor of allowing this to go forward.
Before we get into council's opinion, we need to make sure that the applicant doesn't have any other witnesses. Jordan, do you have anybody else?
Unless Paul Seagat would like to chime in, no, we don't. Thanks very much, Dale.
Okay. Now it's council's time.
Okay, sorry, Dale.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
do you have anybody else that wants to speak against it?
Do you have anyone from the public who wishes to speak at this time? You can use the thumbs up. You can unmute yourself. Or you can use the chat option. Plenty of options here today, thanks to Zoom and its marvelous technology. Okay.
Hello.
Hello, can you say your name for us?
Yes, this is Bill West, and my wife is Anna Rose Zorn West, and she is the owner of the building at 33 and 35 River Street. Do you want to swear me in, or do you want to just proceed?
I'll
Dale?
swear you in, Bill. I don't see you. Are you able to,
I don't know how to do that.
okay.
I
I know Bill's voice, so I'm sure, I know I'm talking to Bill West.
Yes, sir.
But raise your right hand for me. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you'll give to the village council will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
We built these buildings, 33 and 35, a friend of mine, Phil O'Neill, and I, in 1982. And the foundation system that they're talking about for the addition, the porch, is exactly the same foundation system that we have under 33, where Mr. Rowley was talking about, et cetera. So we have pilings going down the shale and sitting on it. Those buildings are 3-story buildings. The load is substantially more than a porch, et cetera. We've had absolutely no problem. And the building is actually, if you were to look at the pictures that you've seen, you'll see that the porch doesn't anywhere near extend as far out as the building at 33 River Street. And finally, as far as Mr. Rowley talking about that area, that actually is owned by Mr. Seagat. It's not owned by us. And it is an area that we talked to Rick about, and he said he was going to clean up that whole area to improve the views out there. Mr. Rowley wants to help, God bless him. But it is clean. We did do some tree work there recently, et cetera. I don't believe there's any garbage there, but whatever has to be done, we would be interested in doing too, seeing done. But we feel that the addition that Rick is talking about is something that is good for everybody, and it has no structural problems based upon our experience at 33 and 35 River Street.
Any questions for Mr. West? Dale, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Since it's come up twice, talking about removing the stuff on the hillside, I assume we're talking about some natural vegetation. Will that be covered when they do the hillside review later with Tim?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
So
actually,
go
I
ahead.
had something to say about that when you're finished.
Okay, so I just want to understand, like, we're not looking at a situation where the deck then leads to clear cutting and like bare slope being laid at the river. Like that would have to be done through oversight with landscape architects to make sure that we're not creating an erosion situation.
You can impose that as a condition of your approval of the variances if you wanted tonight. That's also something that Tim Lannon will look at, but you can be specific to the extent that you want.
Okay. Go ahead, Nancy. I think my question's answered for now.
Okay, so, yeah, so one of the points that actually wasn't mentioned earlier, 115103 permitted uses, let's see, section B talks about only damaged or diseased trees, et cetera, can be removed. And the stump and root structure of the trees on the stream bank have to be left in place to retard bank erosion. So just on the other side of the bridge from this, a project that the Planning and Zoning reviewed extensively, put conditions on the developer that his building line had to be back from the, I think it was the crest of the hill, and he is not permitted to touch any of the vegetation on that hillside in front of him, between his building and the river. And so that same section applies to this, and there's a lot of vegetation there. That's all nice and green now. I know some of those pictures that you have were probably taken in the winter, and it does look kind of drab and dull in the winter, but right now it's heavy with, I don't know if they're trees or what they are. I did not climb down there today. But that is one of the code sections, and we're very strong in our opinion to the developer on not touching any of the vegetation. And so this project, it seems to me, with what was it, nine pillars being drilled in that area, is definitely going to require removal of that vegetation. And again, that's in chapter 1151, the riparian buffer regulation section. there are definitely many additional and significant regulations in the hillside ordinance, which is very long and extensive. And we don't do that review at the beginning of the process. Unfortunately, we do it at the end. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but when you read the code section, there's a lot to it, a lot of review to it. So what about this vegetation that is it going to be removed and drilling those 9 pillars in the ground?
Which of the witnesses are you asking?
Anybody, I guess.
Yeah, Rick or Isaac, can you weigh in on that?
I'd be willing to address that. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the layout of those things, there are no major trees or anything, or even any substantial brush that would be removed in the process of putting those in. Most of that is kind of scrubbed. There are some things that have gotten bigger over the years. You can tell none of it's all that old, which I think is where Mr. Rowley is talking about. I do remember years ago when the village built the stairway down to that observation deck, all that vegetation got wiped out, but it was all replanted after the stairway was down. And I think it was quite successful. So I think if you wanted to make a condition of the approval that if landscape material is taken out, that something significant and appropriate for anti-erosion was put in its place. And again, Rick Duty and Joe Saccone, you guys can jump in here, but I don't think that would be an unreasonable request, that if some of that tall scrubby stuff that just kind of grows of its own accord and does help fight erosion, not quite honestly, but there's a lot of other ways to do that, that could be lower growing stuff that would respect the views and still protect erosion along the bank, kind of like what was done over when the stairway and all that stuff was put down many years ago for the village observation deck. And it's worked well. And I think that same thing would work here because, you know, I really appreciate the question and the concern. I think it's extremely valid because the last thing we'd want to do is like covering off and then watch the rain wash the hillside away and then everything start to get ugly. We're trying to do exactly the opposite of that. And I guess maybe our presentation should have, you know, contemplated that. But I don't think asking for like approval of this so that we can move forward and, you know, Rick can order the doors and keep this construction moving and trying to capture some part of the summer and fall, that it would all be, you know, predicated on them providing you guys with a landscape plan that the village engineer would have to approve in terms of erosion that, you know, would sort of eliminate that that fear or that, you know what I'm trying to say. The words
concern, yeah.
Concern, thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah, because again, I know there was talk at the very beginning from, I think, Mr. Burns and maybe even the our law director, 115101, you were talking about water quality, but that's only one of the code sections. Section C in that is preventing erosion of the stream bank and lessening the level of siltation of stream waters. So in addition to water quality, which may not be as significant a concern, I think that the erosion, preventing erosion on the riverbank is a significant concern that's discussed in the riparian setback.
Right, and again,
regulation.
I think that, you know, Mr. Duty and Mr. Saccone as owners and operators of the business enterprise and Paul Seagat, you know, as the owner of the property, they don't want to see it either. So I think that's really valid. But I would hate to see this get held up for another month or two. So if we could make that a condition of the approval that they'll satisfy the appropriate authority of the village with respect to erosion control with whatever landscaping changes happen, that would be pretty good.
And just to sort of go back to where you started with your comments, Nancy, you know, I think you're hearing this is not a situation where the entire area is going to be clear cut in order to make the holes for the piers. And Isaac, I think, can weigh in on this, but from his description of how those are going to be done by hand, in just the locations, the 9 locations, this is not an instance where the entire area is going to be disturbed. But you know, I think you're also hearing from Rick that to the extent that there is plant material that controls erosion that is disturbed, that certainly, you know, there's something that we're willing and able to replace it with something that will avoid erosion as well.
Except that really planning and zoning really made a very significant effort on the project just on the other side of the river. That developer absolutely not touch anything, you know, so he can't touch the vegetation at all, according to the approvals that we gave. Not just a little bit, not anything. So
no, understood. And again, that's why we're here for a use variance, because you're exactly right. The section that you're pointing to prohibits these piers from being installed here. And that's why a use variance is necessary. But to the extent that one of the conditions is that we are minimizing our impact on the area, hopefully that's what you're hearing. This is not putting in an entire building foundation. It's not clearing the entire area in order to install the piers. It's clearing 9 very distinct. I don't know how wide around these areas are. Isaac, can you describe how wide around each is?
As just give me a second to pull it up. I believe they're 24 inches in diameter. They're either 24 or 30.
24. They went for the depth instead of the width.
They went for the depth.
We gave them 2
Okay.
options.
So it's
Yes.
really small diameter. And again, since it's all being hand dug, no machinery is involved, no small excavators. There's almost no disturbance. There should be no disturbance to any existing vegetation during the construction.
Except for you're gonna have to use an electric or pneumatic jackhammer to get through the shale, correct?
Yeah.
But it's contained inside the
But-
sonotube.
But that's it. But that's inside the excavation, and you're going to use shovels to get down to the excavation, and electric jackhammers or even gas-powered jackhammers. It's with an electric jackhammer, you're talking about a long extension cord, and with a gas-powered, it's self-contained. So you're not talking any truck equipment, any tired equipment, any track equipment. You're not talking a Bobcat or that size piece of equipment.
Right, these holes are about 7.5 feet off the edge of the building. There's really nothing substantial growing there. And when it's all dug by hand, and again, they take the dirt out, they get rid of it, then they drop the sonotube in, they break up the rock, and as they break up the rock, they drop the tube deep, and they take the stuff out in buckets. There's not much impact on the hillside, if any. And again, back to Mr. Raleigh's and Mr. West's discussion, I get why we don't want to disturb that stuff because of the impact on erosion, but this is a really prevalent view from the bridge and from the other observation decks. And it would be nice if, in juxtaposition to the buildings, it was a little bit manicured. And then as you get past 33 and 35 River Street, it goes wild. I mean, just from a land planning point of view, where we've got buildings, we kind of like it to be a little manicured, some kind of ground cover, some, things are a little lower, but work to control the erosion the same way. And then when there's no more buildings, then we go back to the wild, and the valley continues all the way down to Miles Road, and on and on and on.
Okay, Tom, any other questions from council? More follow-up?
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yep, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. I've looked over the site, and first of all, I haven't heard a clear definition of the diameter of the sonotubes, and I'm kind of concerned about the view of the concrete sonotubes from across the river. And then the second part of my question, there are some existing sonotubes there with like a camouflage tarp over the top of them. And I'm wondering, is that part of what was intended, or is that left over from a previous construction project? Can someone answer that?
Well, I'll answer the question about how much of the pier is going to stick out. It's my intent and my design that it only sticks out above grade no more than 6 inches. Like I said earlier, just to make sure that no water flows over the top and damages the wood posts. So in terms of appearance, 6 inches, my opinion is from across the river, nobody's going to notice it after one season. As to what's there now, I can't answer that question because I haven't been to the site in a long time.
Okay.
So did you say that those posts are going to be wood?
The deck is being supported on, I believe we originally called for 6x6 posts, but there's some talk about increasing it to 8x8 posts. So it's still going to be some heavy duty posts at that location, timbers, not just little 4x4s.
But it's wood in the concrete. Is that what you're saying?
No, the wood is sitting on top of the concrete on special seats made by Simpson, Strong Tie Metal Fabricating Company.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they're not embedded in the concrete. I try to avoid that.
Any other questions?
Have you considered actually just connecting the two decks that are there without extending that center portion out 9 feet from the building?
That's a question for Rick and for the two Ricks to answer.
We did, but it just doesn't seem to make as much sense when you're going to go through the effort to do it, to not take advantage of having just a little bit more of an area out there. I don't think we would build it any differently than we're doing. So, yeah, we talked about it, but you know, it's such a low impact and there's not very much seating out there, but it's just such an asset to have a handful of tables and some seats and a little bit more room to gather out there. Like, you know, if somebody rents that whole lower level. My son's wedding rehearsal dinner was down there 2 years ago. It would have been great to be able to open that thing up and, you know, have people go out there, but it wasn't there. So we didn't do that. You know, it could be done, you know, but it's just such a low impact that if we're going to dig out and put the posts, you know, the sonotubes, the concrete piers in anyway, not to put another 4 feet onto it and have, you know, 4 tables out there. It just activates it all way better. It's really going to be a low impact on the view. And it's going to make the whole thing look better. The ARB said so. Other people have looked at it, think it's going to be a better view. We honestly don't believe we're creating any kind of erosion control or erosion issue. It's slope stability is there. We've heard all kind of testimony that it's safe, that it's going to look, you know, it's not going anywhere. The buildings that are there haven't gone anywhere and they've been there a long time. We're building on rock. It really doesn't get any better than that. We're not the first people to do this. It's been done an awful lot. So I guess getting back to your original question, yes, we talked about it, but it just made more sense to go out another 4.5 feet and grab a few tables.
Yeah, because I think I thought you had said that you could put the supports underneath cantilever and not have those posts in the ground like that if the deck were only the 4 feet out.
So going back to Mr. Lewin's answer on that is when you do the 45-degree thing, which I hadn't really considered as much, and he educated me on it, is not only is the load vertically, but when you put the 45-degree brace back to the building and the foundation we don't really know of, and we don't particularly know much about where the floor is at because there's no way to get in there, is that you've got a horizontal load coming off of there that we just didn't really feel comfortable with. It didn't make as much sense as putting the piers into the ground because they're such a low impact. They're 24 inches in diameter. When we say 9 of them, 3 of them are associated with the upper deck that's up on the top. It comes off the bar. So again, you kind of really won't know they're there. They'll disappear in no time, especially if we get to redo, we'll faux paint them. And if we get to do some landscaping, we'll landscape around them, and it'll just be a nice deck with an awning over it, and it will be lovely. It will be an enhancement to the village.
Okay, any more questions from council? Thoughts, concerns? Okay, then.
Yes, we never really got an answer to Jim's second question about the tarp and what's kind of going on now.
So can I comment? Is this Rick? Am I muted?
No, you're good.
Okay. We, in an effort to try to make sure that this was a affordable deck that we could do, we did ask our contractor to outline where they would be, how deep, where exactly they would line up, because the depths of the one post is, I think, 18 feet tall or 16 feet tall. And another is only 4 feet based on the topography. And so we kind of needed and I wanted to just make sure that if we were going to go ahead and do this work, that we weren't going to get into a very expensive proposition after he kind of lined them up and put those things there just to sort of see. It turns out that we can't afford it. We'd like to proceed. If not, we'll remove them and we'll take them away and put the dirt will be there and you won't see them. But I had to do some sort of research to understand, am I asking an unreasonable request from an affordability standpoint?
Okay. Jim, does that answer that question for you?
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you.
Thanks for calling our attention to that, Andrew.
Not a problem. I was wondering the same thing.
Okay.
So just one more quick thing. So you did say that you're only putting 4 tables out there?
I don't think we'll put any more than that. We were actually thinking of some soft seating, actually, Nancy, like a couple love seats and some nice furniture. It seems to be that it's only a party room. I mean, it's a basement party room that we're trying to enhance, honestly. And it feels like a basement right now. We're going to try to lighten it up to make it more attractive. The deck will certainly help that in terms of, you could hear the falls when you open the doors. And so I was thinking that's sort of the nice cocktail area. Then you move inside for your dinner is what I was kind of proposing. It might even be less chairs than the 4 tables we proposed. The swing of the doors limits how much space you have there to work with.
And you're only planning to use that in the summer months?
Yeah, I mean, this is Cleveland. Unfortunately, right. I don't know. I think they have a heater under the maybe under the awning to the west, but I'm not even sure about that. We haven't put the awning up over that yet because we didn't want to damage it during construction. The existing awning of the existing structure.
It's actually to the east, and I don't see any. I don't.
But even if there is a heater, you're still dealing with. I don't know. Joe could probably answer that. How many months a year you got that? But my experience in Cleveland with covered heated awning patios is you get maybe 3.5 months, 4 max. The problem with patios in Cleveland and Ohio, and I've built a lot of restaurants in my day, is they're always too something. They're always too wet, too buggy, too hot, too cold. So you're trying to control that to an extent, but it's still difficult in Ohio.
Hey, council, anything else? No, okay. Do we have anybody who wants to volunteer to make a motion?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
I'll make a motion. Okay. I move to reverse the 2-3 decision of the Board of Zoning Appeals. I think that, that this addition does not meet the standard of unnecessary hardship. I think that, I think to some extent it is self-created because there's a desire to add a few feet onto the back of the building. And the building already is non-conforming and takes up a good portion of most of the lot anyway. It's not due to existing conditions on the property because the building already sits well within the riparian setback. I think the property is used for what it was intended because it's a restaurant and hopefully it'll be a successful restaurant. I'm sure it will be a successful, wonderful restaurant. And I think it does violate the spirit of the zoning and the spirit of the riparian setback rules that are limited to passive recreational use and not disturbing the vegetation. And I don't think it's the minimum necessary to alleviate the hardship.
Okay. Do we have a second for Ms. Rogoff's motion?
I can second that.
Okay, and then Rob, can you please do the roll call?
Absolutely. Grube,
Always love it when I get to go first on one of these. This vote is very hard, which is why I'm pausing for a second here. I feel like we have empirically backed riparian codes for many reasons that we've all discussed here tonight. Specifically, in this case, the question of erosion on the stream bank. But that said, previous zoning has allowed the decks and the stairwells that already exist on this riverbank. And so I am going to vote no because we already have these decks that are there and built in, and it's sort of an extension of something that's already taken place. But I do it with a very difficult thing to, waive our environmental protections on this.
DiBernardo.
Angie, you're on mute.
That makes it so much easier when you're muted. I'm going to vote no as well. I don't believe that the construction of this is going to create harm for the river. I think that it makes the back of the building more attractive, and I like that it provides a second means of egress to the building for fire safety. I would be interested in seeing some erosion control down on the slope after the work is done.
Rocky?
I believe that even digging these by hand when you start jackhammering into rock, it is going to create a substantial loss of vegetation and plant life that is protecting the hill from washing away that weathered shale that's there. That's what's holding it up. And that's going to wash into the river and wash downstream and going to exacerbate an erosion problem that already exists. And for those reasons, I'm going to vote yes.
Newell?
Yeah, I don't have any real strong feelings either way. I've been listening to this conversation. I've walked and looked at the site a couple of times. I do have a concern on the impact of all the different visitors to the village, what kind of view they're going to see, the prominence of this one restaurant in perspective and size perspective. But I've come to the conclusion that the back of the wall as it exists now is not all that attractive. And as Council President Group said, there are decks on either end of the building, and this would be connecting them. I'm not as concerned about disturbing the vegetation and the construction process of disturbing the geological portion of that slope. I think it's in the best interest of everybody, including the owners of the building and the owners of the business, to make sure that nothing falls down the hill. So in those reasons, I'm going to vote no.
Evans
No.
and Rogoff.
I'm going to vote yes. This has been a very difficult decision for me. I've thought a lot about the whole situation. But in the end, I've been on planning and zoning for a long time, and I'm aware of all the restrictions that we've put on people and required of people over the years. And I just can't vote yes on this. So I can't vote no. So I'm voting yes.
Obviously, we would love to see you do some erosion stuff, as everyone said, even though it was not included in the motion. So not part of that, but we would appreciate that. Do we have anything else we have to do here before we adjourn? Dale, you can nod and smile at me that we can adjourn without any issues.
Only if you wanted to, if somebody wanted to make a motion to affirm or affirm and modify. If not, then the decision of BZA stands unless there's another motion.
Oh, do we want to make a motion on the deck variance? I'm sorry. I was like, oh, you know.
I assume Nancy's motion was on the use variance.
Right.
So you still have the other variances you have to vote on.
So I would move, do we have any discussion on the deck? Oh, sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
Well, I didn't think we appealed that variance. It was approved. And so if this remains approved, then we don't have to do anything with that. The deck was approved. Actually, that was the only one vote on that.
The only appeal was on the use variance?
No, it included the non-conforming structure of the.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
So just
that was, but I thought that was only if the use variance was reversed, then then we would have needed to also reverse the deck variance. But since the use variance was affirmed, then the deck variance stays affirmed. There's no difference to it. I mean, that was passed by BZA at, I think it was a 1, or however you say, 4-1, 4 yes and 1 no on that.
But in your petition, you didn't say that you would withdraw your petition on the other two counts.
Well, how about for the sake of just clarity for everything,
right?
I would vote to affirm the decision of BZA on section 1145 O2B.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Grube, second by Evans. Rob, could you do the roll call, please?
Okay, DiBernardo.
Aye.
Rocky.
Aye.
Newell.
Aye.
Evans.
Aye.
Rogoff.
No.
And Grube.
Aye. Okay, sorry about that. And that
You have
concludes
one.
all of our business for tonight, right, Dale?
No,
There's
you
one
have
more.
one more.
There's one more. Yeah.
You got one more.
Yeah.
You have 1151.02.
Okay, I thought it included 02 and 03.
I'd like to make a motion to affirm the BZA decision on 1151.02.
Second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Rocky.
Aye.
Newell.
Aye.
Evans.
Aye.
Rogoff.
No.
Grube.
Aye.
DiBernardo.
Aye.
Now you're done.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's been a long week of meetings. So with all that, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight, and we are adjourned at 9:02 p.m.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.